Arjan Schalken is the program manager at UKB SIS at UKB. That's the Dutch University Libraries Network and the Royal Library. He works on the realization and implementation of sustainable publish and read deals, a big question for us. The UKB SIS, I hope I'm saying that correctly, program is the realization of a data warehouse to monitor, manage, and analyze publication-related data as input for negotiations, which we would love, contract fulfillment, and tracking the open access life cycle of publications. He also advises UKB and the Dutch universities on their 100% open access strategy. He's the project manager of You Share, We Take Care, and he helps universities implement Article 25FA of the Dutch copyright law, supporting researchers to share their research publications in institutional repositories more easily. He's the project manager also for implementing consortium agreements with fully open access publishers. So Arjan is very well qualified to speak to us. Thank you, Arjan.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And feel very privileged to be here. So thank you for inviting me. Be able to share some knowledge. That's different than sharing answers, because much of what I will share is context related, and it's up to you on how to use that. But I hope that I can share some insights that are useful, and I also know for sure that I can learn a lot of your experiences and take it home with me also. Thanks for the introduction. It's already said, so that saves me some time. By the way, before I worked for the consortium that is with the central of the Dutch libraries, I was working at the Free University of Amsterdam as deputy director of the library, and before that had several library management roles. The Dutch consortium, I think, is well organized. We have 14 universities that are also connected with 7 university medical centers, and the libraries are at the center, at the core when it comes to the consortium and managing the open access agreements. And we are helped by SERV, and SERV is doing the more administrative, financial, legal part. Almost all publications somehow are related to that network, to the consortium. So 67% is corresponding author, and even 95% of all Dutch publications have some relation with one of our authors in our consortium. We have experience with open access agreements since 2015, when the word transformative agreement didn't exist. It was a read and publish deal. And from then on, we steadily add more agreements. And now we have 22 transformative agreements. 9 of them also include full OA journals. 8 of them have a cap, and 2 of them are subscribed to open. So you see that there is diversity in the term transformative agreement. Around 15,000 articles are approved per year as part of all those agreements. And that means that the mid-sized library approves around 1,200 articles a year. So, from a help desk point of view, what does that mean? How do we organize ourselves? That is the core of my presentation now. I'm fortunate to give you more presentations in the rest of the week. I'm also here the rest of the week, so if you have your own personal cases, feel free to tap me on the shoulder at lunch or at dinner or at a party or whatever, but hopefully I can also share some more insights in the rest of the week at the other presentations. So when it comes to transformative agreements, of course, it has to be said, the approval part of the rejection, that is an important part of the work. But when you have an agreement, a lot of questions that are coming to you. So that's another part of the work that's done by the help desk. Because we have several capped deals, and like one of the previous speakers also mentioned, those are based on first come, first serve. You have to give them a warning, and preferably on time, so they know what's going to happen. That is a role of the help desk. More general communication about transformative agreements, so not only related on Q&As, but also about the agreement itself. What does it mean? And more, we also have an active role in checking missed open access and checking non-compliant open access. And non-compliant open access means our funders have additional requirements about open access. For example, it must be a CC BY license and not a CC BY NC or CC BY NC and D license. That means the way you can reuse it. And that means that, and in practice, all publishers find it very hard to build in compliancy in their workflow. So one of the discussions now is, can the library help research to be compliant? So we're not the police saying you're not compliant, but maybe the funder will act as the police, and maybe the library can help the author to be aware we have to change something in your license, so to prevent that you have an issue. Then there are much more variations of open access, and that is also part of the help desk. So more communicating about open access in general. And then you see, and that is also very interesting and challenging, more and more expert questions are coming to you about copyright. You need a librarian with a legal background, predatory journals, etc., etc. So really in-depth knowledge is needed. And like one of the previous speakers also mentioned, if you have an open access fund, then that means a whole another playing field of additional work, because our transformative agreements are all managed on consortium level, so you only have to approve as a library, and all the financial part, administrative part, is done elsewhere. I think one of the challenges of the questions is, what do you do yourself? What does the consortium do, and what do you do together? So if it comes to the consortium versus the library help desk, I think all questions that are related to researchers, that's the main focus of the library. You don't need to ask it to the consortium, it's too far away. The consortium focuses more on the contract related issues. Also, the standard questions, the standard Q&As can be well covered by the library, while the very complex once-in-a-year questions, it's better to address those from the library towards the consortium, and then the consortium can dive into that. Single cases, so unique cases that are very specific for your own university, can be best addressed by the library, while a trend, oh, this is the second or the third library who has the same question, let's discuss this with the publisher, done by the consortium. And very specific cases, that one general specific author who wants something, that's best done by the library, while the general issues, so it's very important for the consortium to have a feeling about what is going on at library level, and then see, okay, we have some common issues. It prevents that every library has to find out themselves. Let's do it on the consortium level. I think one of the questions is, what can you do not as a library, single library, or as a consortium, but what can you do as libraries together? And sometimes that's a step to centralization. So you do it first together and then decide, okay, this is better to do by the consortium on central level. But some things it's just best to do together, not on a consortium level, but on a library level. So one of the examples is you can profit from the expertise and the tooling that one library has already made, and then use it together. One of our libraries, the Wageningen, the World Library, built a journal browser. So a researcher could go to the journal browser, type in his favorite journal, and then see, is there a deal with the journal or not? But also the impact factor and several other information was in that tool. And other libraries said, oh, this is interesting, can we also use that? And at the end, the World Library said, okay, that's good, but we have a contract, you pay us, let's say, 2,000 euros a year. Based on that, we can manage our staff, and we do it. At this time, there's more and more demand for the journal tool, and there are extremely innovative ideas. Now we say, okay, maybe now it's time to incorporate in our central consortium, but it started in one library. Another example is that in our working group of open access, there was a lot of discussion about we should inform researchers better about copyright, and not only on the website, but also making a brochure, because there's so much information about copyright. Let's make a brochure. For the consortium, that is a very specific time-consuming task. For one library, it's very time-consuming. But if 3 experts from 3 libraries do this together, and for us, we even built on the JISC brochure, make it our own Dutch brochure, then you do that, and then suddenly everybody has the same brochure and can use it. And last but not least, we have a website, openaccess.nl, that's managed by the libraries. The libraries, so all library experts volunteer to be to do some work. Every 2 years, someone else participates. Also from the consortium, someone participates, and all the deal information, but also all more general open access topics are on this website. And some libraries say, okay, in 9 of the 10 cases, we have a very simple website, but we point to the central website. Some other libraries say, no, we have a big staff, we have big communication staff, we have also our own website. But there you see also collaboration has a lot of advantages. And so one of my the questions for you to take home is the third path, collaboration. That is, I think, something that can be a way to be more effective, more efficient, etc. Okay, now coming to the team, and some presenters already addressed it. How to build a team, an open access team. I think no libraries in the Netherlands said, okay, well, we have a new department, it's called the Open Access Department, there's an Open Access Manager, we hire some new staff. We all began with, how do we organize this within our current setting, and combine some skills from several departments. I think one of the most important skills, especially when in the workflow, is you need staff that is process oriented, that knows about metadata, and that for the approval process. And those staff is often working at acquisition, licensing, repository management. And in general, at least 2 persons in the Netherlands, libraries have two staff members from that team. They don't work full time, but it's very convenient for have a Monday till Friday service, because there are 2 colleagues. If one has on vacation, the other can do it, and vice versa. But there are also more and more specific, detailed questions are coming up, and that means that within the information specialist department, or how do you call it, maybe you have a research specialist within your library, there's also knowledge about the publication process, about the way researchers work, and it's important to add at least one staff member from that department to dive into the more complex situations. So at the end, there's often a team of 3, where you see that the standard questions are handled by more the process-oriented metadata specialist, and more the specialist questions about that are publication related, that are research related, are handled by the information specialist. And that information specialist is also often the fallback when both metadata specialists are on holiday or they're sick. So you have at least 3 people who have a Monday till Friday service. And that also means that the team works from out several library teams, at least two departments. When you look at the approval process, I think all libraries in the Netherlands prefer a manual check. So if the publisher says we can do it automatically, we say we want to have control, and I think around 2% of all our requests are rejected. The teams have one login, one general email account, so that makes it more easy to cooperate within your team, or if someone of the staff stops with the work and someone else is entering, you just have your general email address. The affiliation check is based on the info provided by the publisher, and of course you hope that it's the eligibility, the name of the institution and the name of the email address is the same, but that is not always the case. Reflecting on that, I also noticed librarians want to have as correct information as possible. So of course, from a library point of view, you want that the researcher is using the institutional email address. However, there is a however, at least in the Netherlands. It's not only about communicating and informing and being awareness for the researcher, but many researchers only work for 1 or 2 years at the university. And sometimes the submitting and approval process takes longer, and they want to be able to communicate. And I think until 2-3 years ago, if you stopped working for a university, that email address you could use for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Now, because of security, day one you stop working for the university, IT cuts off your email address and cuts off your communication. So I think more and more researchers will going to use an email address they control themselves. So it's perfectly fine and explainable why you want as much researchers to use your institutional address, but this is not something you can fix by communicating because there are other forces in place. At that moment, the human resource tool or the Outlook tool is very handy, of course, to see if a researcher you don't have an email address from is in that database. In the tip of the library lending desk is also very interesting. I hadn't pointed that here, but that's a good tip. In the Netherlands, we also have our CRIS systems, the Current Research Information Systems, where all the input, the output, all the publications are mentioned in. That is a way of communicating as a university what you do. And this is also a very handy system. So if there is a registration, an output registration system in your university, you can often also see there if a researcher is working for you, or Kit is already mentioned. And in most cases, that does the job. If there is still doubt, then those the two help desk employees from the acquisition background often ask the information specialist, we're not sure, what is your second opinion? And if that doesn't do the job, then the author is contacted. I think the main challenges are the conflicting information. So let's say that's not even Gmail, but they say I work at University X and they have an email address of University I. And University I is a non-Dutch university. It's an English or a German university. And you think, okay, well, they maybe also have a deal. Why should we pay for it? So it's not a neutral Gmail, but it's more a conflicting other institution, non-consortium institution that leaves some questions, and then that's also a reason to check with the author. And the fact that sometimes the metadata provided is very poor, and there's maybe a DOI, but the article is not online yet, so you can also check the article. So that is also a reason to look at to ask the author. Most universities use one general email address in the Netherlands, so openaccess.institutionname.nl. I also see institutions who use two, openaccess.institutionname for the more general open access questions, and a very specific one for the verification, for example, OA verification. Some use very special help desk tools, but only like Top Desk, but only if the general lending desk or the IT help desk also use that. There's no help desk, OA help desk, who by itself uses an additional help desk software. It could be useful if you have more and more questions. So you have a specialist help desk software, because that has a Q&A in it. You can label questions. So at the end of the year, you can say, okay, we have so much questions about this topic. We have so much questions about that topic. And then maybe you can use it to improve your website or to report to management. But here you see the help desk of the open access help desk make use of the tools that are already available. And like I always said, by having two colleagues who are really focusing on the approval process and one backup, it's possible to have a Monday to Friday within 24-hour approval pattern. Some of the tools, I think a very important tool. If 3 or 4 people per library are involved in the contracts, and we have 22 contracts. A lot of people have 1 or 2 questions from one publisher contract per month or even per year. If they have to dive into that PDF with 100 pages to have one specific answer, that takes a lot of time. So we made a knowledge database, relatively simple, and have all the information structured for the libraries. And we manage that on consortium level. So if we have a new deal, or the cap is changed, or the deal is changed from hybrid to hybrid and full OA, this knowledge base is updated, and the libraries have access to a compact overview to prevent that they have to dive into the PDF. So it's about the publisher and the year and what type of journals, and is there a cap or not, and who is eligible. Is there an issue with the workflow? For example, with some publishers, there could be non-eligible articles in the pipeline because the publisher is not capable of preventing that. Then libraries have to be aware, for this publisher, you have to check if the journal is part of the deal. In 99%, you don't have to check that, but if you have such a deal and someone is working just 1 or 2 days a week for that in your help desk, he or she needs to have that information in place. So a knowledge base. Also here, this knowledge base can be made by the consortium, but you can also say as a library, okay, we build this knowledge base together. One library does that, or everybody owns 1 publisher or 2 publishers and adds and maintains the data. This is an example of the openaccess.nl website, where we have an overview of all the deals, and per deal there is information about what is the deal about. If you want to be eligible, do you need to have an institutional email address, because sometimes that is needed. Is there a cap or not? There are PDFs from the workflow, from the publisher you can find, etc., etc. So this is, let's say, more a contract focus landing page. It's used by both librarians, by the way, also, and researchers, and sometimes librarians also point researchers to this information if they have a question about eligibility, etc. But all libraries also, of course, have their own communication tools, and that can be on topic related. This is from Leiden University. It can be positioning the open access specialists so you know who to contact. This is an example of Leiden, who, it seems rather complex, but still, as for a researcher, a kind of a workflow. How can I publish open access? Or if there is no deal, how can I make use of green open access? So how to comply to the 100% open access policy of the university. And this is an example of the journal browser. In the journal browser, you fill in your favorite journal, and then you see if there's a deal or not. So the interesting part here is in openaccess.nl, and many websites are more contract driven. You see a publisher, and then you see a contract. But most researchers are not focusing on contracts, and they are even not focusing on publishers. They are focusing on a journal. So they have a journal in mind, and want, based on the journal, is it eligible or not? So the journal browser does that. You only have to fill in your journal, and then you see if it's eligible. And you can fill in several journals, and based on that, compare where should I submit my journal. There's a template based on the university, and also the information is partly managed by the consortium and partly managed by the university themselves. So this is the part to the right is from the Free University, and in the middle is from the University of Utrecht. They are the same journal, but for example, in Utrecht has a large open science community, and also says we don't want to have the impact factor that important. So they decide to let out the impact information, while at the Free University, you still see what is the impact factor of the journal. So as a library, you can decide, or as an organization, you can decide which information to add or not. It can also be, this is not part of the deal, but we have an open access fund, and till $2,500 you can make use of that fund, etc., etc. Then there's reporting. We were more and more data driven, and you saw in the beginning, yeah, we got individual Excel files from a publisher, and all publishers have different formats, and they were stored on one place, so libraries could go to that directory and get the information, but everybody was managing their own data, and it was not compatible with each other. You could not compare it. Then one library said, okay, we will do it. We will combine that Excel. Everybody was very happy, but it takes so much time, and even combining that data is at the end not enough, but because this is only data from your what you have published within a deal, there's also much publications outside of that. That was one of the key questions to me when I become program manager, is do something with the data. We need some kind of a data hub, and this is what we built. I think this is rather complex in a way that this should not be the beginning point, but we now have a data hub where we first of all combine all the publisher data from our deals, so we can have an overview of what did we publish in 2022 of all of our consortia deals, and see that in the context of what did we publish outside of those deals, what did we publish in 2021, what did University Utrecht publish versus University Groningen or Wageningen, and we steadily incorporate more information. So from our repositories, from Scopus, we also now have OA switchboard data in it. We combine that with paywall information about open access status, DOIJ, that is open access journal information. So that also means that if a university says, okay, what do we publish outside the consortium deals in full open access journals, with one push of the button, we can present them that information. And we also try to estimate the price based on the open APC database. We know in the world what is an average APC price for that journal, and then universities can have an internal debate about the cost of open access and reflect on that, but also be aware of the fact that besides the 40 million euros, so that's around the same as dollars, that is incorporated in the consortium deals, there's also about 10 million dollars outside of the deals. So what should we do about that? Missed Open Access, we present a list of articles that looked as eligible but are not on the reports of the publisher, and we have designed a workflow, and then the consortium can't check that, but we give it to libraries, and libraries give it to us and say, we think this is missed, and with almost all publishers we have a missed OA paragraph. I can come up to that, explain more later in another presentation, and then we can start a missed open access, a retrospective open access action, and make it open access later on. Very short challenges. Much knowledge is implicit. Cooperation with several other departments. There are more and more topics. You start with open access, then it comes to fair data, then it comes to citizen science, and before you know it, you have to know everything about everything. CAP management is becoming more and more complex. And in the Netherlands, more and more managers think the libraries have solved open access. Let's make that staff in use for data, open science, etc. So even more and more work is coming. So that's for now. I've taken a lot of time, and maybe you also have some questions.
Thank you so much. I think it's fascinating to see what you've done, but I have a question in terms of your help desk reporting tool. I hope we can get something similar quite soon this side. But I wanted to know, nobody's talking about research data as part of the process. We talk about research outputs. Is there a check to see whether it is compliance with the release of the research data as well, and not just the research output?
Yeah, I think so. Libraries are also heavily involved in research data and fair research data. and happily we started with open access because publishing is much more structured than data management. It's very hard to get track on data. And in the Netherlands, we are rather good at reporting about open access and tracking open access, and not that good in tracking fair data. But more and more, you see that data sets or links to data sets need to be linked in the CRIS systems, in the research systems. So this is work that is done by the library. But it's more of a natural evolution. It takes time, but at the end, but the same goes for open access for books, open access for conference proceedings, and pre-publications, etc., etc. So the whole playing field of open and registration and tracking of open increases. Yeah, but I think there is a task, but also a challenge for the libraries there. Yeah. It's a feeling I'm standing in the sunlight here, but I saw a question over there.
Thank you so much. That was very exciting, especially with the help desk tool that you have. With us, we have the funding that is provided by the university. Hence, the manual process that is daunting to process the individual APCs that are not part of the transformative agreements, which it's much easier, as we all know that we only go there to approve and reject. But this part of the process where the publisher is not part of the transformative agreement, it's a daunting one because it has a lot of processes that are involved. Now, my question is, with the tool, the help desk tool that you have, is it able to, who access it? Let me just ask that, who have access to it, especially with the kind of information that you populate in that help desk tool? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. So first of all, the tool is about tracking what is already published. It's not an administrative tool to approve or to manage your budget. There's a whole other ballpark. I already noted for myself that the University of Utrecht has a fund with a limit of 2,500 euros. I want to ask them, how do they manage that process, and share that later on. With the data we have, is that, so we combine data that's already about articles that are already published. So it gives you insight in what is published open access. What we do is we combine information from what we get from the publishers, from Scopus, from our CRIS systems, and other resources. Combine that, and then we send reports to the libraries that are at this moment are standard reports, and we do reports on request. So if they have a question about it, we want to dive in, let's say, what we publish for Diamonds open access, or we want to analyze what we publish for Wiley, not only in the deal but also outside the deal, then we give them that information. My ambition is that at the end of the year, libraries can also enter that workflow, that tool themselves, the data warehouse themselves. No, so the tool is we developed it on behalf of all libraries. So let's say we made it, but I think the libraries own the data in the tool. We only provide them a service, and at this moment, that service is that we presented the information in an Excel file. The service will be hopefully at the end of the year, that they can log into the data warehouse and just say, okay, I'm going to filter. I want from 2022, from the publisher Elsevier, see all the publications that we have published outside of our Elsevier deal, and that we paid, that are open access. And then they get a report. So they can have a manual report made by themselves. By the way, this tool is not a copy. This is not a copy-paste situation, because, for example, the CRIS, the Research Information Systems, is typically something that maybe is something that we have in the Netherlands. But of course, one of my presentations is about this tool, is about the data warehouse. So later on this week, I can dive into it more deeply.
Hi, it's Celo from University of KwaZulu-Natal. It's not a question to say, it's a suggestion to SANLEC, because it looked like most institutions are having the same problem regarding email used by authors. So can the SANLEC liaise with publishers and allow authors to use more than one email when they're submitting their articles? Thank you.
Yeah, so my general answer would be, at least it's important to know what are the standard ways a publisher facilitates eligibility. And that can be an email address, that can be a drop-down menu, it can be an IP address you're working on, and based on that, the publisher spots what your affiliation is. So I think that it needs to be transparent, because based on that you know how to communicate. It's also good to discuss improvement with the publisher based on your experience. At the same time, I know many publishers have just one standard workflow that is working for the whole world. So also we say, yeah, but the language is not what our authors are afraid, based on this line, that they have to pay APC. You have to change that. Then you say, and we have a text for you. They say, yeah, but if we use this text, then the whole world sees that. So it's I think transparency, awareness. It's also about discussing this with publishers, and I think that's not something you have to do as a library. That is a consortium thing, and maybe also consortia also meet. For example, in a few weeks in Berlin, consortia meet, and there it's also good for consortia to say what are our priorities, and eligibility is an important one. I think emails won't fix it, but if the DOI will be clickable and not the DOI, so the unique link, and you can go to the internal system of the publisher and see the publication before it's published, then that can also work. But now, yeah, the DOI, you have not, you can't use it. So there are several ways of fixing this problem, and I think we have to find some way that is workable for all parties.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Did you find in the Netherlands that some institutions were not that willing to share their information and felt intimidated or wanted to just not be part of a larger hub?
No, not. I think there's a lot of data going on between institutions and about institutions. Institutions don't like to be benchmarked, so I'm not going to use it to benchmark. That is one thing. The other thing is, yeah, in our data hub we can see it, but the data the publisher provides and the data that you can find on Scopus and other things, the data is there. We make it only more easily accessible. And so I think the benchmarking part is the political part, and I leave that more up to the individual university to decide how to use it. And if a university comes to the conclusion, maybe we don't make that much use of a deal, that's up to the university themselves. Or these are the bottom 5 users. I mean, because also there's a context why some deals work better than for us than others. And when it comes to working better, it's not about making use, by the way, of open access. In the Netherlands, 99.5% of the researchers want to make use of open access. So I'm trying to also pick up some of the discussions, if you're okay with that. We started open access as a service. I mean, all our deals are not what we think the researcher needs to publish in. It's about where they are actually publishing in. So we follow the researcher. That's one thing. And our green open access strategy is about making use of an article in the law that helps the researcher, and we totally serve the researcher, so we help them also there. So open access as a service is a strong point in the uptake of open access. The downside is that most researchers were hardly aware of the fact that their article was open access in the first place. So that's now more of a topic when it's part of open science, how you may become them aware. But we're not saying you need to go up, publish open access, but at the same time, the institutions say we go for 100% open access. And that means if a researcher don't make use of a deal, then somewhere along the line, that article is made subscription open access, and somewhere along the line that author gets an email from the library. We have a repository service. Do you want to make use of that repository service? Because we have a 100% open access policy. Last year, 2 of our universities has a 95% open access score for both their corresponding author articles and the co-author articles. So we are reaching 100% open access, and that is why some board members think it is fixed. When we start with Elsevier, we had the start of a deal in 2018. We had an uptake of 70%, and Elsevier said, yeah, well, it's the author's choice, so those other 30% apparently don't want to make use of the deal. And I said, okay, then we're going to ask those other 30% of why don't you make use of that deal? And we sent out 200 emails, and and this is my own use case, this is the Dutch use case. One author said, I don't want to make use of open access because I think it has a negative impact on the system of scholarly communication. The other 99 said, I wasn't aware, I was afraid, I thought, and everything between it. So that was, and with Elsevier you can change the text in the workflow and make it tailor-made for your own consortium. So first step, instead of make it open, the standard dot is, yes, I want to publish open access, and you have to take action if you don't want it. And there is mentioning of open access is you don't have to pay any additional cost, and it's part of your policy of your university, and it's required for your funder. Now we are 2 years later. That led to around 90%, and for the other 10%, we knew who was not going to make use of it, and the libraries had an email address, and they could correspond to the author. You're sure that you don't want to make use of it? And 99% of that 10% said, yes, I want. So we came to almost 100% for Elsevier, but it took a lot of work. That last 10% took a lot of work. And now we had a pilot, and it's now also standard. The author can't choose anymore. It's open access. And if you don't want to use open access, you have to send an email to Elsevier. And in the last year, 5 authors sent an email, and after explaining that they really, really, really don't pay, you have to pay, all choose for open access. Also, BIPSAM has done the same pilot, so Elsevier is perfectly capable of designing a workflow that is fully, that gives you a 100% open access score. If you want it, if you say, no, we're fine with it, we don't want to put pressure, or we have a cap, and we're happy that there is not a 100% open uptake, otherwise we would have no APCs left in June, that's okay, but no, you can negotiate the quality of the processes with publishers. I also will address it in one of the other sessions. Yeah? Yeah. Oh my God, I have no idea how long the time is already on 0, 0, 0, 0. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Arjan.
Okay, you're welcome.
That was very useful.
Thank you.
I think we're going to bend your ear quite a lot more.